If you would like a free newsletter on this or other subjects, just give us a call at Christian Answers. The phone number is area code 512-218-8022. That's 512-218-8022. Or you could email us at cdebater@aol.com. That's cdebater@aol.com. Thank you.
Greetings and welcome once again to our program. I'm Larry Wessels, Director of Christian Answers, and I want to welcome you to a show number 2 on the subject of atheism. And joining me in studio today is our Director of Research, Steve Morrison. Steve, great to have you here again, brother.
Always a pleasure.
And as we explained from the last show on atheism, we were supposed to have a televised debate in this studio. I was going to take on an atheist from Dallas who had challenged us for debate. We set up for this debate for a 6-month period. The atheist, though, however, didn't inform us that he was not showing up for the debate until 10 minutes before he was supposed to arrive. Now, I've had lots of other people who've challenged me to debate back out, but usually they did it long before the actual day of the proposed debate. So this is the first time I've had someone back out of a debate that late in the ball game. So to kind of make up for not having an actual atheist here to debate with, we're doing a mock debate. This is show number 2 now, and we're going to pick up where we left off last time, debating actual atheists, but we're going to call it a mock debate in the sense that the atheists are on tape in public forums, recorded for the public, and we will then respond to their atheistic arguments, so the viewer at home will at least get a taste what it's like to debate with atheists and so forth. So that's what brought all this about. The true atheists not showing up, and yet we were able to find some canned atheists, you might say, on tape. And so we're still able to do a debate one way or another. Well, anyway, brother, we're going to pick up where we left off from last time. I would sort of like to start this discussion off on atheism with the chart that's next to me here for a minute. We had mentioned this in the last show about the logical errors of atheism, and as the viewers at home can see, it's erroneous to assume that refuting the opponent's theory will automatically prove that my theory is true. Now, when you're listening to these debate clips with Madalyn Murray O'Hare, Sheila Thompson, Brian Lynch, and Dan Barker, the selected atheists we have on tape, keep these logical errors that they're going to be committing as they argue in mind. Okay, erroneous to assume that merely giving an alternate explanation for something automatically refutes any other interpretation. So just if the Christian gives an argument why God could exist, and then the atheist comes back and gives some alternate, it doesn't necessarily follow that the original interpretation given by the theist is incorrect, and so forth. Number 3, erroneous to assume that arguments for and against the existence of God have any logical or material bearing on whether God exists or not. And that's basically true. You can give 100 arguments why God does not exist. But if God exists, I mean, if he's really there and you come up to God and you give him 100 reasons why he shouldn't be there, it doesn't change the situation. I could sit here and tell Steve 100 reasons why he's not there right now. But the bottom line is, the reality is, Steve's really there. So there are logical problems with making arguments about the existence of God, because if he's really there and you're arguing he's not, that doesn't necessarily follow that he can't be there just because you're arguing against it.
But here's if you don't have a valid argument against against the existence of God, and you have 10 invalid ones, or 100 invalid ones, or 1,000 invalid arguments, it really doesn't matter how many you have if they're invalid.
Exactly.
And that kind of gets into your fourth point, too.
And in fact, what you just said proves the point. If I have 100 arguments against the existence of God and God really exists, well, automatically that means that those 100 arguments must have been invalid. Because God's really there. But anyway, okay. Erroneous to use arguments from silence to establish a position for making positive pronouncements on the basis of silence. Now, earlier in the last broadcast, we played a clip of Madalyn Murray O'Hara saying that Jesus did not exist because Roman Senate records did not show any record that Jesus exists. So she used an argument from silence to try to say that Jesus did not exist, while using another logical fallacy of card stacking, ignoring other facts and evidences that would prove that Jesus existed. So you're dealing with this kind of stuff. Okay, erroneous to use self-refuting arguments. Atheists like to say, well, everyone believes, or you're all nuts if you're a religionist, or all truth is relative, there are no absolutes, you can't speak positively. But see, by saying there are no absolutes, you're making a self-defeating statement that defeats itself by saying there are no absolutes, but you're making an absolute statement that there are no absolutes. So even a statement you make that there are no absolutes is not absolutely certain, if you follow the logic on that. And if you don't worry about it. But the thing is, these are the kind of things you'll find when you end up arguing with atheists, debating with atheists. And one last thing is we have the famous dot example at the bottom here. The atheist who, if this circle represents all knowledge in the universe, and this dot here represents the atheist himself and what he knows personally, and if we give him the benefit of the doubt that he knows 1% of all knowledge that can be known in the whole universe, that means that there's 99% of the information in the universe that he's not familiar with. But yet this atheist with this 1% of knowledge of the universe is declaring that he knows that God does not exist, even though he's 99% ignorant of what's out there as far as the information process. So I would seriously wonder about someone with 1% information going on 99% ignorance, making a declarative statement that God does not exist. And that's what you get when you're dealing with atheism. Okay, with that said, we are going to go to our debate clips, and Steve and me will come back and start debating the issues with the atheists you hear on tape. So put on your helmets and get ready for Madalyn Murray O'Hara.
I tell you, actually, there's two phenomena going on in America at the same time. One is that there is a rapid falling away from Orthodox religion and a rapid liberalizing of religion. There's a movement, I think, of the Protestants toward humanism, and there's a movement of the Roman Catholics toward what they call ecumenism, which is a kind of acceptance of the old Protestant belief, so that there's this constant liberalization and falling away from the church. And this is brought about not so much by me, but by science, by our ability now to instantaneously convert news items to everybody, etc., the amount of education that we have, and the amount of, space probes, all of this is causing it falling away from religion. But at the same time, in the other direction, we have a very frightening thing. Right. And that frightening thing is that religion is gaining tremendous political and economic power like never before in our life. And I am very, very worried about this. I think that ultimately there will be a non-religious humanistic world where people will be concerned with the world here and now and forget this rubbish about a life hereafter.
Thank you very much.
Very positive statements,
I have to, because
Reverend Martin,
I have
constantly.
To. Well, I'm going to, because you make them.
But these statements are just your opinion, and your opinion only. They are not based in historic facts. They're not based in
How do you know?
Facts.
How do you know?
Based in any other.
How do you know they're not based in biblical facts?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
They are.
Are they in the Bible?
And you are so ignorant of the Bible, it's pitiful. You go around making it. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's no opinion. I could give you a quiz right now for a first-year Sunday school kid, and you couldn't pass it. You don't know beans about the Bible. You sit here and pretend to be an authority on religion. Your religious background is virtually nil. Now, don't play something you're not.
Number one, there is no such a thing as 4 authentic books of the New Testament. Number two, nobody knows who wrote them. Nobody knows when they were written. Nobody knows what they refer to. John is so wild, it's fantastic. Nobody knows where the Q source is. Nobody, you don't know a thing about this Bible.
Since you're such an expert,
it's a conglomeration of rubbish.
Since you're such an expert.
And you're an expert on rubbish?
Just a moment.
We are right now, for instance, we are right now having a tremendous argument with the biblical scholars as, for some people the argument is settled. Whether or not Mary was a virgin or whether this is to be transcribed as a girl who is a young girl. All right,
you're changing the point.
No, I am not changing the point.
Sure you are.
The word Mary the Virgin, this is in the Bible, and this is biblical. Is it biblical that she is an actual physical virgin with a hymen which has not been ruptured, or is it biblical that she is a young girl? What is it? And this is what I'm talking about. You don't know.
I want to bring this point out. Atheism has produced, in the last 50 years, 2 beautiful philosophies, communism and Nazism, and you're welcome to them.
You know this isn't true.
I know it is.
You know that fascism is the Roman Catholic Church personified.
Oh, now you don't like the Catholics, do you?
No, I don't like the Catholics.
Okay,
I don't like any religious people.
Now, Allen specifically states that the basic law of, one of the basic laws of physics is that from nothing, nothing can come. And I want somebody to prove that from nothing something
No, nobody. This is still a theory.
Prove it.
This is still a theory, and
Madam,
you know it.
If you're going to try and tell me that from infinite void proceeded infinite energy, I submit that this is insane.
I don't know whether this is what happened. You don't know either. You haven't the faintest
idea.
In
the
you know.
God created.
God. Here we
you
go
don't
again.
like him, but he's there. Just
Thank you very much.
And don't worry
you
about
cover
him.
your ignorance by one word.
Don't worry.
God.
Don't
God
worry
did
about
it.
him. Don't worry about him, because he's going to be present at your funeral.
You know, one of the things that happens constantly, and this is a funny thing, is that the Christians and religionists have absolutely no sense of humor.
Hold on a moment, please.
No sense of humor at all. You can't joke with them about their religion at any level. You can't tell, you can't have religious cartoons, or religious jokes, everything. It falls flat in their face because these people are so seriously intent on their insanity.
Mrs. Murray, can I ask you a question?
You're interrupting me.
Well, we're back. I don't know if you enjoyed hearing those outbursts from Madalyn Murray here, but we're here to analyze the argumentation that atheists use in their, I guess we should say, war against God and those who believe in Him. But anyway, as we get ready to deal with her recent argumentation there on the clip you just heard, I'd like to recommend to our viewers here some books that are available. If you go to your Christian bookstores, there's books such as this, Examine the Evidence, Exploring the Case for Christianity. There's many books of this nature at your Christian bookstore for those who want more evidence on the existence of Jesus, the reliability of manuscript evidence for the Bible, biblical prophecy, archaeological evidence. All these things are available and readily available for anyone that would just take the time to study. We also have great books on this particular subject that we're on, atheism. Outstanding book by Dr. John Blanchard, Does God Believe in Atheists? Very good polemic against atheism for those who have to deal with them. Another great book is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. Both these books are just filled with great information to help the Christian deal with skeptics, free thinkers, non-believers, and atheists who will just want to sit there and try to tear the Bible to pieces. But this will glue it all back together again and get the atheists all upset when they can't do it. So anyway, I just wanted to recommend these books for our viewers out there, and there's many other good books out there as well. I'm thinking offhand of Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. In fact, when I was at the Christian bookstore the other day, he has a new latest version. Mm-hmm. I mean, that book just has grown to this monster-sized book over the years, and that's available as well as many other outstanding books. Well, anyway, let's get back to Madalyn Murray here, Steve. You heard all this stuff, and as well as our viewers. care to start taking a swing at some of this?
Well, just kind of a small point she made. She was saying that one trend was that many people are becoming more secular, and she was saying that education, and she mentioned space probes as having people fall away from religion. I don't know, maybe that's wishful thinking on her part. As for myself, I have a PhD in chemical engineering, and I know many other people with PhDs who are Christians also. Why space probes? I never thought that you would see anything if you went to the moon or out in space, that you'd actually see God, and it's like, space probes don't do anything to hurt my faith. Sometimes I just kind of wonder about psychology for a second, leaving the field of religion. Why someone would think that? It's like maybe it's hopeful thinking appear as reality in their mind, that these things, there are just so many outlandish, unsupported things. I basically don't have any idea why she makes all these claims, except that maybe that's all she's got to say. Another thing is what she doesn't claim. That on the tape they were saying that from nothing can anything come, and she cannot affirm that. She believes that nothing can come from nothing. She can't affirm that nothing can't come from nothing. So in my mind, on that very basic level about where did everything come from, maybe the reason that she attacks so much is ultimately she has no view. She has no view of how everything got here. Was it, you look on your chart you had before about, was the universe self-existent? Was it self-creating? And she doesn't see anything satisfactory in any of those four things. And it's like, if you're going to debate something, it's harder to debate it when you don't have a consistent position yourself. And I've yet to hear her consistent position about, if reality exists, and I would think that she would agree with that, then where did it come from? And she says, I don't know. All she knows is that it can't be Christianity. And and then finally she attacks the Bible. You said tear it to shreds. I would sort of disagree with that. I would say, as someone else once said, the Bible is like an anvil that has outworn many hammers. She said,
that's a great saying.
Nobody knows who wrote the books of the Bible. Okay, well, what if we could find somebody who wrote some of the books? Would that satisfy her? I sort of have my doubts, but if it would, what if we found like Justin Martyr in 138 to 165 A.D. who mentions the book of Revelation being by John? Okay, well, someone knows. Okay, does that make her happy and satisfy her? I don't know about that. What if we found Polycarp, talking about the book of Philippians, and these people that they said who they were by, or Papias, who said the Gospel of Matthew was by Matthew and Mark was by Mark. All right, and Papias was a disciple of the Apostle John, so you would think he would know. So she complained that you can't trust the Bible because no one knows who's writing the books. Okay, well, we found someone who knows the book, so I hope that would make an atheist happy.
But what I found in dealing with atheists, Steve, is that no matter what you come back with them with an answer to, you can answer them on a myriad of arguments they might bring. But the minute you answer them on one point, they jump to something else. And then you answer them on that point, and then they jump to something else. They're like little anti-theistic bunny rabbits, and they're going to just go hopping around trying to get you on some argument that you can't answer. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you can answer their argument, because to them, they don't care really. They're just trying to throw their hogwash out there and throw it all over you and hope they make a mess out of you, and then they can be happy about it. But they don't really want to know the truth. They don't really want an actual answer to that. And if you give them something that's even viable, well, then they do their bunny rabbit thing and they'll jump to something else so they can try to make themselves happy and feel better about themselves by maybe winning a minor victory in an argument or something. But it really doesn't matter to them about truth, because after all, in the atheist worldview, as we pointed out in show number 1, they don't have a moral law. There's not really any, since there's no God, there's not any moral law giver. And so what's right and what's wrong is really more of a matter of convention. What is right for this tribe over here in this country, and what's right for this group of people over here? It's all right for them there, and maybe these guys over here do something totally different, but it's all right for them. Truth becomes relative morals become relative, ethics become relative to the circumstances at hand, because really, in an atheist universe, you don't really have any basis for absolute moral right or moral wrong. So if there's no God and there's no absolute on what's right or what's wrong, well then, if you want to murder your neighbor because, you know, maybe he stepped on one of your favorite flowers one day and you wanted to get him back, or maybe you wanted to commit adultery with your neighbor's wife, or maybe that guy over there's got a lot of money and you're going to knock him over the head and steal his money and you think you can get away with it. Well, you know, atheist universe, that's going to work. You know, it's kind of funny in a way. I think of how, you know, we're listening to tapes of Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who's now passed away at the time of this this taping. She was murdered along with her son and I believe it was her niece, all at the American Atheist Center by one of their co-workers there at the American Atheist Center, who I think, if my memory serves me correctly, was embezzling money. It had something to do with finances. And to cover his tracks, he took the three of them, killed all three of them, buried them out in some cow pasture somewhere, and then a few years went by, and then later he admitted to it, and he showed the authorities where the bodies were buried, and they were able to confirm that it was Madalyn Murray O'Hair's bones in that grave, because she had had a hip replacement or something. And I remember reading in the news that, you know, they were able to match that hip replacement bone or something with the bones in the grave there. And so, you know, she was murdered by one of her own atheist co-workers who, following the philosophy of atheism, where he obviously thought he could get away with it, didn't see anything wrong apparently with killing three people.
But hold on a second. What exactly is wrong with that? I mean, we would say, well, that's against God and what He commanded. But an atheist would not say that that was against God, because there wasn't God. Well, he'd say, when asking atheists, well, was it wrong? I mean, he wanted the money. You know, many atheists would say, yes, that was wrong. But then you ask them, why? Why is it wrong? Why is it worse to kill a person than to kill a flower? And it's like, they have no basis for saying why it's wrong.
It's just their opinion, their subjective opinion.
Yeah, apparently the atheist that murdered her didn't have enough reasons himself to see why it was wrong. But you ask any atheist, what is your basis for saying that's wrong? And I have yet to hear an answer.
You're totally right. Well, with that said, Steve, let's go back to some more debate clips, and we'll just come back on the other side with the viewers here, and we'll see what we come up with next.
This is always the New Testament according to St. Martin, all the time.
What about according to the people that wrote it?
You can't speak for them.
Well, I'm quoting the text.
You cannot speak for them. First off, you don't even know whether that text is accurate.
Well,
and then you keep quoting Greek when we're dealing with Jews.
I quoted one word. Well, that shows.
So it means that there was at least a minimum of one translation.
Mrs. Murray,
from the Jewish
Mrs. Murray
of that particular
Mrs.
era.
Murray, since we're now on the subject of texts, what was the New Testament written in? What was the language?
I would be delighted to find out. Do you
don't
have
know?
any idea?
You
no.
don't
Do
know?
you? And this New Testament
Greek.
that you have. Oh, and this was
Yes.
written the first year after J.C.
Madam, you know, in the history of the world,
any other time
what,
in the world,
Mrs. Murray, are you contributing?
I'm contributing, I hope, some reason.
We have a person on the phone.
Would you compare yourself, of course, to our
hello?
Lord favorably?
Yes, yes,
Listen, I wouldn't even let him lick my boots. Jesus Christ has not influenced the total world because Christianity has a very small hold on a very small part of the total world population. And it always has. It's been extremely localized in Europe and then over to the United States. And there's a kind of a funny version of it down in South America, which has to do more with their own pagan religions down there than it has to do with the so-called Christianity, because there are overlaps in that culture. So actually, I don't think that in the history of the world he has had as much an impact as Confucius, or as Buddha, or as many of the other figures of this kind. He is particularly known to us in our culture because we stress him. But go to many other parts of the world and he's completely unknown, has been.
John, can I say something? All right.
equal to.
But yet a moment ago, unhesitatingly and unblushingly, you affirmed first the historicity of Confucius, about whom we have even less data than Jesus Christ. How do you account for this?
Now, this is your opinion, again. And
Quote
here,
me
now
some sources.
you are an expert on Chinese
No,
history.
ma'am. I'm an expert on comparative religion.
You're an expert
Quote
on
me the
physics,
sources. No, I'm
and
not.
you're an expert on
No.
Chinese history.
No, no.
And you're an expert
Comparative
on
religion.
I didn't bring. You notice that
You said Confucius.
Now I want to tell. Let me tell you
Oh,
something.
no. You said
You
Confucius.
keep
Tell me
quiet.
how you know he
You
exists.
keep
I
quiet.
won't keep quiet.
You have with you a
tell
gentleman
me.
tonight
No,
who has brought along a
no.
suitcase full of
Tell
books
me
so
it's
that you can
Confucius.
quote them.
I haven't
You know what
quoted
I
any of
brought
them.
along? I brought along nothing. I'm perfectly
I agree
willing.
to that 100%.
I am perfectly
Nothing.
willing for you to send me a letter down in dear old Austin, Texas, and I will send you the historic proof for Confucius. I didn't bring it with me tonight. I'm not concerned about that.
No, just one moment.
I don't have to stand
You don't
to
know
prove
anything
him.
about it.
Here we go.
You got to go back to Austin to look it up.
You are also an expert on education of Madalyn Murray.
No. I'm an expert on one thing. Madalyn Murray.
On St.
Madalyn
Martin's
Murray.
version of the Holy
Now,
Bible.
Madalyn Murray, with her Society of Separationists, makes statements and gets a lot of publicity on the idea
You
that
hate
she...
that, don't you?
No, I don't. I think
You
have
just
a,
love that
I think you have a
publicity,
right. I think you have a right to do it as an American. But you know what is objected to? It's objected to the vindictive and the malicious manner in which you attack all religion and clergymen and then proceed to try and make it look as if you're a martyr. That...
It's not when anyone seriously sits there and says that someone died, and after 3 days of death they arose and rolled back a stone and then had a meeting with their disciples and descended into heaven.
Ascended into heaven.
What did I say? Descended.
Well, that don't forget. Those are those things.
I'm sorry. I think you're out of your mind.
Well, the question as to what can or what can't happen in the universe is a question that can be determined only by investigation. Nobody can sit in an armchair and say resurrections don't happen.
I don't think, Dr. Montgomery, you're going to convince Madalyn Murray of...
I don't think you can convince anybody that someone can be dead 3 days and arise. I don't think...
Well, by the same token, you're not going to convince Dr. Montgomery that he is wrong either. So let's, at this point, move on with your calls and
No,
comments.
there's something here that's very important, and that is this. If the religious community can convince us to be so irrational as to accept the Bible.
Oh, folks, this is just an aside. I picked up this particular magazine, the American Atheist magazine, at the Atheist Center, not at the American Atheist Center, but at their national convention at the Wyndham Hotel in Austin, Texas, years ago. I also picked up their other tracts and literature. You know, There Is No God, a few biblical contradictions. It's interesting, when you look at their contradictions, it's obvious that they don't have a clue what the context of the Bible is, because it's ridiculous when you go through what they say are contradictions. And if you know anything about the Bible, they're not contradictions at all. But anyway, just briefly to mention the fact that I once had the door slammed in my face by Madalyn Murray O'Hare herself. And I thought I'd just briefly mention that little story to you. We had done a 4-hour video series for cable access TV on atheism, the religion of atheism. Madalyn Murray O'Hare's son John called me because he was upset about our presentation on atheism, and he wanted a debate, and he gave me directions how to get to the American Atheist Center so I could set up the propositions for the debate and where it would be held and all that stuff. So I got directions to the American Atheist Center, which was an unmarked building behind a bunch of tall bushes and trees where you couldn't even see it from the road. And when you got to the building itself, it was totally unmarked, and it was nothing but two-way mirrors. And you couldn't even walk in the door because it just said press button to ring a bell or something. So I go up there after John Murray, Madalyn Murray O'Hare's son, gave me directions to get there so we could set up for this debate. I go there, I ring the bell, and I think a secretary, somebody's going to open the door. I'll go in and we'll work out the debate proposition. What happens? Madalyn Murray O'Hare herself opens the door, opens it slightly, and then kind of leans on the door and blocks the doorway and is leaning against that door, and she looks at me and says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I was called by your son John to come here for a debate proposition to set up for a debate." And then she says after that, "Debate? Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Dayspring evangelism, things of that nature. And she gets this really bad look on her face. She goes, "Oh, you're one of those Christian nuts." And then she stepped back, wham, slammed that door right in my face. And I'm staring at myself in this two-way mirror of the door. So see, I said this, she said that, I said this, wham. But anyway, that was the end of that debate. All right, we're back. You just heard some more diatribes from Madalyn Murray O'Hare and her convictions about God and Jesus Christ. And one thing I noticed, Steve, was that she didn't seem to want to be able to prove anything. She just wanted to attack, but not really prove anything. And in fact, almost in a way, sometimes seemed to be proud of her ignorance of certain topics.
Yeah.
And it seemed like she was simply using that homonym attack or an argument when her opponent in the debate was pointing out some deficiency in her argument. She would almost be proud of her ignorance there, and then turn it around and say that the other guy was an idiot for believing that rubbish or whatever it might be.
Well, you have to have as good offense as you can if you have no defense.
It seems to be the case. And in that particular set of clips, and I'm going to let you take a swipe at it whatever you want to, but just to refresh the viewer's mind, she was talking about the text of the Bible is not accurate and how anyone today can't speak for New Testament writers, since we're living in this day and age, and the New Testament writers are living way back there, so we can't talk about what they said. She made that argument. She didn't know that the New Testament was written in Greek. I thought that was interesting. That's rather glaring ignorance. She said that she would not let Jesus lick her boots, which is a pretty insulting thing to say. She said that 3 days is for a person to be dead and then rise is not believable. And Steve, I think we want to spend some time on this note, but you can address anything else you want to at first. But I think the resurrection of Christ is a key factor here that we have to address, because it is a vital and essential Christian doctrine to the whole faith. But before we get into that in detail, anything you want to say about how we can't speak for New Testament writers because we're living here and they were writing back there? Or?
Sure. First of all, I think we can, because they did write something understandable and that we could understand. But what if we found someone who could speak for New Testament writers? Would that make her happy? Would that satisfy her? I don't know, but we found people who can speak for New Testament writers, and they are the early Christians, starting with Clement of Rome, who wrote 97 AD, and Papias, who wrote about 110 AD, and many others. These early Christians, now they didn't just learn Greek; they learned Greek as children. They dreamed in Greek. They spoke Greek. Some also, especially in Palestine, also spoke Hebrew too. And like these people, they told us, they interpreted the Bible. They told us what these things meant that we're reading. And their theology agrees substantially with our theology today, and we don't have any problem with that. So if we could find someone that would speak for them to her satisfaction, then it seemed like that argument ought to go away. Now, is it that she's unaware of that there were Christians before modern times? Is she unaware of the writers, or is she just like choose not to? I don't know. But it seems like a pretty big oversight, or card stacking as you call it, to be able to say you can't find anybody to speak for them. They're in a whole culture with lots of writers, including Christian writers. And anyway, a key point about the resurrection, this is perhaps, I think she kind of hit, in a way, on the central point between atheism and theism in general, but Christianity in particular. Is it possible for a miracle to happen? Is it possible for someone who's been dead to rise from the dead? Okay, if you already beg the question and make the assumption that there's no God and that nature is sort of the highest thing there is, then you'd have to say no. But if there is a God, then you cannot say that it's not possible without basically begging the question. It kind of reminds me of the Wright brothers. About the time that right before they flew in their airplanes, it was quote unquote proven by scientists that man, or specifically heavier than air aircraft, can never fly. I mean, that was a proof that somebody gave. Well, the Wright brothers did it anyway. Now, did the Wright brothers break the law of nature? Well, actually they didn't. But what they did with their curved wings and everything else is they superseded the laws of nature that the other people were focusing on. So when Jesus rose from the dead, did he really break a law of nature? No. God made the laws of nature. God can supersede them anytime he wants. And so it's a circular argument begging the question, if there's no God, miracles can't happen, therefore there's no God. But if there is a God, then there's no logical reason that she gave or any other atheist can give that says, assuming that there is a God who can do miracles, prove to me that miracles can't exist. You can't do it.
That's exactly right.
And now likewise, we can't say because of God, therefore the miracles, therefore there's a God, but we can say, look at the evidence for the resurrection, the evidence of the people who saw it, what the non-Christians claimed, what the Christians claim, and we can say, well, look, this miracle happened. This is historically attested, and therefore this would be strong evidence that there is a God.
Amen. Well, speaking of that, we want to get into this in detail here for our viewers' sake, particularly since Madalyn Murray O'Hara brought up the fact that, you just can't believe that a man that's been dead for 3 days would rise from the dead. But let's take a bunch of skeptical, atheistic arguments against the resurrection of Christ, look at them in detail, and see what conclusions we can come to. Now, the viewers will see at home on the screen the chart. Jesus' followers made it all up. After Jesus died, his followers invented a plan to deceive the entire world into believing that Jesus was the promised Messiah, the fulfillment of Scripture, and the Son of God who rose from the dead. Answer: evidence suggests that such a deception is highly unlikely. People will not knowingly die for a lie. The disciples were not fearless liars who wanted to fool the world. After the crucifixion, the disciples fled in fear for their lives. However, once they saw, touched, and spoke with the risen Lord, their lives were transformed. Filled with the Holy Spirit, the disciples left their former jobs and entered a life of telling about Jesus. And as a result, endured hunger, persecution, abandonment, imprisonment, suffering, torture, and death. Former journalist Lee Strobel writes, quote, "People will die for their religious beliefs if they sincerely believe they're true, but people won't die for their religious beliefs if they know their beliefs are false," end quote. Furthermore, all of Jesus' followers doubted the resurrection until Jesus physically appeared to them. Then they believed. The women at the empty tomb were afraid and thought someone had stolen the body. Once Jesus appeared, the women worshipped him and shared the news with the disciples. Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. The disciples did not believe the women's report of the empty tomb. They did not believe until Jesus appeared to them. Thomas did not trust the testimony of the other disciples. He requested to see and touch Jesus in order to believe. Once he did see Jesus, he believed. James, the brother of Jesus, was embarrassed when Jesus preached in Nazareth. Matthew chapter 13, verses 55 through 56. He may have doubted the resurrection. However, after encountering the risen Lord, 1 Corinthians 15:7, James became the leader of the Jerusalem church, and according to Josephus, was stoned to death because of his faith. Saul of Tarsus was a Pharisee and strongly opposed Christians, followers of Christ. Saul opposed this new movement so much that he persecuted believers and assisted in the execution of early Christians. When the risen Christ appeared to Saul on the Damascus road, Saul was completely transformed. Saul, also known as Paul, became one of the greatest followers of Jesus. Throughout his lifetime, Paul was continuously persecuted and imprisoned for preaching the good news of Jesus. Paul's letters to churches and pastors eventually made up 13 books of the New Testament. We have pamphlets available on archaeology. Here's just a couple of them. One of them covers the Old Testament archaeological evidence, and the other one covers the New Testament archaeological evidence. And if I were to fold these out, what it has here are all the archaeological finds that have been dug up over the years all over the place, just proving what the Bible says about cities, places, people, things that really took place. So this isn't just a fantasy book, a forged book, like so many religious papers might be, but the Bible is backed up with archaeological evidence, over 2,000 fulfilled prophecies, and any number of other internal evidences that prove that the Bible is the Word of God. Of course, an atheist wouldn't buy a bit of this because they accepted any 2 seconds of material that either Steve or me have brought up during these 2 hours of shows we've done. Well, then they'd have to throw out their atheism. So they've got to deny every bit of evidence that we possibly could bring up just to hold on to their non-belief. But anyway, let's go back to the atheists now and hear some more of their enlightening comments.
I think that what it is, Tom, is that somewhere along the line, every person does not believe that there is a God. Every person is an atheist when they're born. They're born without religion, and religion is something which is laid on them as they grow up. And I think that everyone goes through the stage that I went through and that every atheist I know went through when they started to ask questions and found that the answers really weren't very satisfactory. They said, well, wait a second, here's a contradiction. I think if God created the world in 6 days, why are these scientists saying that the world wasn't created, it was formed over a period of millions of years, and these people seem to have their data, these people seem to have their facts? How can the religious people and the scientists be right? I think that people try praying and find it doesn't work, and then they say, well, why should I continue to follow this system of saying prayers since the prayers aren't efficacious? Why should I continue to go to church since all they seem to do is ask for money and they build huge buildings with it? And I think that at some point everybody comes to a position where they say, religion is all make-believe. I don't feel any God. I don't sense that there's any great spirit. I don't sense that the Bible is the only source of ethics. I don't sense that the Quran is a good ethical guide or whatever they use. And I think that for fear of being ostracized, they jump back into the belief system and they never really bother to explore their doubts or to find answers to their question. They just say, oh, well, everybody else around me seems to believe this, therefore I better shut up and go along with this, even though deep down inside I'm not really satisfied. And I think that atheists walking around personify these people's doubts and are living actual proof that the gods posited by religion are not real, since, we walk around, we don't get cast into lakes of fire unless some religious person decides to throw us into one. We don't have horns sticking out of our heads. We don't go around doing terrible things to people or ourselves. And, we are perfectly well-adjusted, normal, everyday people. And everything that people are taught that they need religion to accomplish seems to be accomplished by atheists who have none. And I would maintain that religion is essentially a drug, although it's a self-induced drug treatment. It's a psychologically unhealthy mental state. It's a mental state that is of no positive use to the individual, and therefore it should not be encouraged in the culture.
You just heard Brian Lynch of the American Atheist Center. He was giving his opinions about how you're born an atheist and not a theist, but of course, as we already discovered in show number 1, this is not the case. It's the reverse. He brought up scientism, like science was against religion. He sort of assumed evolution there, things of this nature. And Steve, briefly for our audience, we have a chart up here that kind of touches into some of this evolution creation controversy. Could you tell our viewers a few things?
Sure. Let's talk first about Nebraska Man and Piltdown Man. Now, let me just say that evolutionists and creationists and everybody all agree that these are fakes today. So why am I bringing this up? Because at the time, evolutionists were so biased that they immediately latched on to that. For example, at the Scopes trial, Nebraska Man was presented by leading scientific authorities as evolution, as proof of evolution. And this was based on a tooth from a supposed historic man. However, when more was dug up, it was found it was a pig. Okay, and then in 1912, Charles Dawson brought a Piltdown Man. Now, Piltdown Man was a deliberate fraud. It was a modern ape skull that, and the bones had, the teeth were filed down and the bones were colored to make them look old, and it was later exposed as a hoax, and everyone agrees upon that. But it's just they are so intent on trying to prove evolution with what they could. Let's look at a couple more examples. Cro-Magnon Man and Neanderthal Man. Okay, Neanderthal Man lived till about 25 or 30,000 years ago, and I'm sorry, Neanderthal Man. And Neanderthal Man, if you were to look at him, he wouldn't look all that different from modern man. And they actually found skeletons that were halfway between modern man and Neanderthal Man, which shows interbreeding in Mount Carmel in Palestine, of all places. And Neanderthal Man, they had a few little differences as far as muscle structure and where tendons were attached, and they were very muscular, a little small but very muscular, but they were a type of human that's not around today. Cro-Magnon Man, which was actually different than and older than Neanderthal Man, was very much like modern man, with two differences. There were more types of Cro-Magnon Man than there were modern man, and Cro-Magnon Man had a slightly larger, not smaller, skull. But Cro-Magnon men in South Africa painted pictures of themselves, and they had afros. Okay, Cro-Magnon men in Europe, they would look like a modern Swedish person or Ukrainian person. And so these are not evidences at all of evolution, though they've been presented as such, but they are evidence that there are kinds of people around that aren't around today, which is actually what the Bible teaches.
Right.
So, and you mentioned the word scientific. There's a difference, just like people might want to say that astronomy and astrology, they both study stars, are the same thing. No, they're not. Astrology is a superstitious religion and astronomy is a science. There's a difference between science and scientism. Scientism is the faith, an unreasonable faith in my opinion, that science has all the answers and is almost like a religion of science, versus the study of science, which is a proper study, and I've studied myself. So when someone says something in the name of science, it may be science or it may just be scientism.
Exactly. In fact, as the viewers can see on the chart at home, it's dealing with the scientism that Steve was just mentioning. Science can produce credible theories as to what happened in the first moments of the universe's existence, some claiming to take us back to within a tiny fraction of a second of the Big Bang. Science cannot go back beyond the zero time point. Science can speculate as to how the world came into being. Science cannot explain why it should have done so. Science can demonstrate the consistency of scientific or natural laws in both space and time. Science cannot tell us how they came to be there or why they should be exactly as they are. Science can provide helpful statistics on demographics. Science cannot explain why human beings exist. Science can study and analyze trends in religious belief and behavior. Science cannot supply any reason why either should exist. The subject is simply outside its terms of reference. With that said, I'd like to demonstrate one other thing, a fallacy in the atheist thoughts and logic. You know, they're really into sense perception. I only believe, like a materialist, what I can, touch, taste, smell, hear, so forth. And so for them, that's the only thing that's real. That's why they discount God, say God's not there and all that stuff. But I'd like to have our viewers look at this little book I've got here. They can see that. That may look like a cat, but really that's a mouse's face there. So it looks like a cat, but really you have a mouse's face there. That's our classic sense perception. And then here we have another classic picture. And now the viewer at home, I'm asking you, what do you think you see there? Do you see an old cowboy, let's say, or do you see a young cowboy? And the answer is both of them are there. First, out here, this is the nose of the old man, but if you look at it a different way, that's the chin of the young man. See, your sense perception can be affected by what you think you see. If I ask an atheist these kinds of questions, he might get messed up. I've always liked the art of Escher, but anyway, take a look at this from Escher. What are you seeing there? I asked two people yesterday, And one person said, oh, I see a bunch of bats. And that's right. These black things are bats. But another person told me they see a bunch of angels, because all they saw was the light, which are the angels. So you have bats and angels there in perception. Now, if I were to ask Steve here in studio with me, Steve, how do you spell the word shop?
Well, S-H-O-P.
Okay, now, what do you do at a green light?
Well, stop.
No, that's not right. Because at a green light, you go. You see, so your sense perceptions can lead you astray. A lot of times atheists don't get it. They think God cannot be everything he's supposed to be, eternal, omnipresent, and all these attributes of God that we know, holy, just. But, when you think of space, for instance, where does space end? You have an answer for that, Steve?
Well, we don't know that it ends anywhere.
Right. In other words, it's almost like it's infinite. The space is just space. It's out there all. You see, God can be the same way. If I look at a building, I don't sit there and go, well, it's amazing how that building just got there by accident. It just occurred. No, we always think a builder has a builder. A building has a builder. And then if I see a painting, I assume a painter. You look at creation, it's the same way.
Get right to the subject that is at hand first of all, then we can get to some other things. But Sheila is going to be speaking in Chicago on the 27th before the American Rationalist Convention. And her speech is titled The Problem with Jesus, and it deals with the non-historicity of Jesus of Nazareth. She believes that Jesus never existed. Sheila, could you give us a little bit of information on that subject, what you're going to be talking about tomorrow, and where you ever got the idea that Jesus of Nazareth never existed?
Okay, this is a subject that I've been absolutely fascinated with for the last 8 months. The Freedom from Religion Foundation went on television with a program, Jesus, Man, Myth, or Fraud, and it was at that time I decided I better learn something about the historicity of Jesus. When I started digging into it, I found out that the overwhelming number of Protestant biblical scholars today do not believe that Jesus of Nazareth, a Jesus, in other words, who said and did all of the things that the Gospels say he said and did, probably, in their view, never existed. And that if there was any kind of a Jesus upon whom Christianity was founded, that type of Jesus we really know nothing about. And this is what I've been consuming myself with the last 8 months, is studying the historicity of Jesus. And I am absolutely positive myself that there wasn't a Jesus of Nazareth any more than there was a Paul Bunyan.
Objection, it says the New Testament is not reliable. Maybe that would be better to be phrased that they hoped that the New Testament was not reliable. But how can they say that? Because the Bible supports, archaeology supports the reliability of the Bible. There were some things and some titles, like in Malta being called Chief Man of the Island. That's a very strange title. It sounds like it might be made up. They found archaeological evidence that he was called that. They found arches. Talking about Pontius Pilate, talking about various things that somebody would not have known to write these little historical details, such as Luke, unless they lived at that time. We have the early manuscripts preserved today. So it's sort of like the mindset that seems to come across is, for their view to be true, they have to believe these things are true, like the Bible's not reliable or it wasn't very important. And so they say, therefore it wasn't, because that's what we want to believe. And they never went back to really check if it was true or not. But we can see from the historical evidence that people who come up with some of these objections are just either ignorant of history or maybe willfully ignorant and don't want to check. So, looking through all these objections to the resurrection of Christ, we just have to say that why are they're objecting because they feel they have to, not because of the evidence. To me, one of the strongest evidences for the resurrection is what's been called the witness of blood. As Larry mentioned earlier, nobody would die for what they knew was a lie. I mean, people might die for a lie, but they themselves will believe it's true. And yet all of the apostles, except one, were martyred for the faith. John was exiled for his faith, but he died a natural death. But they all were martyred, and they could have saved themselves by saying, let me go, I'll admit it was just all a fake. But they would rather die than do that. And they chose to do that. And if they were with Jesus for 3 years and they were there, it seems to me that they would know whether it was true or false better than anybody else.
Well, with that said, let's go to our last atheist.
Really, I did that for years and years.
What were you going to say, Dan? If God exists.
If the God of the Bible exists, and I would be forced to accept it, and I would accept it rationally, I still might choose not to spend eternity with that bloodthirsty tyrant. He could still not demand my respect.
Well, you want to go with the bloodthirsty tyrant Satan? Do you want to go with him? Oh, Dan.
Really, I mean, you're really serious about this, aren't you, Rose?
Yeah, Dan, I
Now, wait
care
a
about
second.
you.
Oh, hold on just a second, Rose.
Okay.
Dan, answer her question, Dan. If
there is no devil and there is no God, but if there is a God and he's the God of the Bible, then I would feel rationally justified. I would feel obligated not to worship it, not to respect that bully. He's a tyrant.
So you wouldn't want to go to heaven?
I would not want to spend eternity. It would be a hell to have to live in Rose's heaven.
So where would you go, Dan?
Well, if I'm going to be sent to hell, then I would go willingly, and I would rub it in God's nose for sending me there. I would say, if you want to be a bully, then you be a bully.
But Dan,
Hold on a second, Rose. Are you saying then, Dan, assuming in your own heart, assuming that Christians are correct about evil and goodness and heaven and hell and God and Satan, that if all of that was true and you discovered that to be true, that when you died, you would rather spend eternity with Satan than with God?
Well,
that's what you
not spend eternity with an evil God, and that God that Rose believes in is an evil deity.
Satan is the evil God, Dan. Get Christianity right. You're the Reverend. Where would you rather go?
I certainly would not worship and respect an evil deity like portrayed in the pictures of the Bible.
So where would you go, Dan? You'd have to go.
Not my business. I would not want to go up in heaven and be a hypocrite pretending to worship.
But the only other way to go is to hell. So what I'm trying to get you to admit is that if all of this was true, that you'd rather spend eternity being with the damned and with Satan, right?
Well, Mark Twain said.
Tell me what you say. I don't care what he said. Are you telling me that you'd rather spend eternity with Satan than with God? Yes or no? Why do you find it difficult to answer? You have already spent an hour denying.
All right, we just heard from two more atheists, Dan Barker, who would rather be with Satan, and Sheila Thompson of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, who is saying the same old argument we've already dealt with quite a bit, that Jesus didn't exist and all that sort of stuff. Well, Steve, we're almost out of time. Any final comments here?
Well, I think that a lot of the basis for atheism is not logical arguments for atheism, but maybe deep down it really is emotional. And Dan was telling us his honest feelings, that he was kind of like anything but God. And let me tell you, you don't want to spend eternity with Satan. And God's our creator. He can do with us what he wishes, but he is good, and it's the only good game in town.
Amen. And I'd like to conclude with, like I said, with the original atheist didn't show up for our debate. I did have my closing statements. I'll finish it here in this mock debate with atheists. The Bible is trustworthy for many reasons, but the bottom line is that you, the viewers, know in your hearts that there is a God, and that you are not just some chance accident caused by a cosmic explosion caused by nothing. You have a mind, a personality, a sense of beauty, the emotions of love, responsibility, and so forth. You are made with purpose, and the focus of your existence should be to the God who definitely is there. Amen. Trust the Lord Jesus Christ for your salvation, so you won't have to spend eternity in hell with Satan like that atheist you just heard wants to do. God bless you all. Join us again next time. I'm Larry Wessels with Steve Morrison for Christian Answers. See you next time. Bye-bye.
check out our websites. BibleQuery.org. This site answers 7,700 Bible questions. HistoryCart.com. This site reveals early church history and doctrine, proving Roman Catholicism is not historically or doctrinally viable. MuslimHope.com. This site is a classic refutation of Islam, a counterfeit religion created by Muhammad. Free newsletters are also available.